I was never intending to make videos like this. It was never my idea that it was, oh yeah, I'm going to make loads of videos about church failings and abuse and people that are hurt. That was never my intention. But my proximity to it all, especially when the news came out, that an experience that I had that I don't think I'd really told anyone about, the stuff that I experienced, that Soul Survivor, and the stuff I experienced with Mike Pilavachi, all of it was so normal and normalised. And what's interesting for me is I need to get past the hurt of it, and when people speak to me about the hurt of it, and I'm sort of getting into now trying to understand what are these cultures that people have just swallowed wholemeal. This is absolutely fine. We're kind of stuck on the hook, dragging into shore or wherever we're supposed to be dragged, and that's acceptable. So I'm starting to look at that, and as a result, people have been getting in touch with me, not just Soul Survivor people, and I've spoken with over 60 people connected to Soul Survivor, but people connected to John Smythe, people that are connected to Jonathan Fletcher, both of which I suggest you look up if you're wanting to understand this stuff more. And one guy I spent some time with, he actually stayed at our house, and we drank some red wine and whiskey into the evening, and then I filmed with him as he was driving somewhere from mine to the next place, and he was involved in Jonathan Fletcher and told me his story. I filmed it. He doesn't want me to use it, and actually that's pretty common now. But the thing that stood out to me when he was talking about his experience was there's such a close connection between evangelical church and adult grooming, and I think it happens because of two things, but certainly one. Now, the first, from my experience with this sort of adult grooming, was that's definitely what I experienced a number of times, actually. Now, in Deuteronomy, I think it's maybe 6, God sort of tells people to follow his decrees and understand love. I don't remember it all off the top of my head, but what God then says to Israel is, teach your children this when they rise, when they sleep, and let it be this continual lesson. Now, that's certainly, it's how I was brought up. My parents taught me how important God was. I had a relationship with God from a very early age. I remember, I think, and again, you can doubt it and everything, it was a child's mind, my child mind, but I think I remember seeing an angel through the curtains when we were having a nap during the middle of the day. I don't know how old I would have been, maybe 3 or 4 or something. So I had a relationship. I've had a relationship with God for my entire life. My parents followed that sort of lesson or command in Deuteronomy that God gave the Israelites, that continued through Proverbs. There are other things about teaching your children, and then Paul writes about it. Jesus says, "Let the children come to me." There's this continuing sense that we learn this as children. So if we're taught as children that we listen to adults, that we listen to older people, that our faith comes from them, that's then naturally taken into the church. And my own story, so I told you about as a child. As I got older, like a lot of people my age, and I guess now, I learnt the guitar, and I started off learning Guns N' Roses and Metallica and everything else, and at the same time I was learning worship songs. I was leading worship in church. My parents, my dad plays piano brilliantly, and I would play alongside him in the church that we both went to. For me, that was a really valuable time in my faith. Also, my music became such an important part of connecting with people, of worshipping God, and a sense of, and I got to have a kind of a central part in that community or communal worship. What a privilege. So that was my learning. My dad would, I remember storming out of a practice with loads of other adult musicians in the church, because I don't know what it was about. I was just a teenage tantrumy. And they all, and I don't know, they were all forgiving of me, probably seeing me as that. But there was this process that I was always learning. Now, as I thought, right, what can I do with my life? I then thought, well, I wanted to learn how to do more worship or have that more as a central part in my life. I turned down an opportunity in television as a result and went into this. Now, I went into Soul Survivor with this kind of receptive openness where, well, these adults tell me how I can learn, how I can grow. And the environment they're wanting is to set that up in that way. So we have a bunch of teenagers or people in their 20s on the discipleship course that I did in Soul Survivor, where you need to be receptive and open, and you need to listen and almost have that same hierarchical parental relationship of Deuteronomy or Proverbs, of Paul writing in the epistles, or even Jesus saying, let the children come to me. I haven't really grown up an independence in this context. I see church as being an extension of my family, which was really positive. But I wasn't learning an independence. That independence was kind of I'm no expert in this stuff, but there was a dualism. I was learning independence at school. I was learning independence at work. Before I joined Soul Survivor, I worked in a warehouse in Walthamstow to make the money to pay for the course. I remember putting on a stone of muscle. That's how hard I worked. I learned an independence in that. I worked in an off license from when I was about 16 till when I was 18. There was always this independence, but it was separate from my church relationship, which was I'm a disciple, I learn, I grow within the context that's set for me. Now that gives that context and the people responsible in that context a huge amount of power. And I think, and we know that's where grooming can take place. Because I'm receptive, I'm listening. And if that, the age-old thing of how you cook a frog, put it alive into cold water and slowly warm it up. That's how we get groomed. This chap who I sat in the car with was telling me about how he was groomed into this stuff with Jonathan Fletcher, which was just horrific. At first, you go to, you're given this kind of loyalty talk at the gate at the house that you're going to live in, which happens to be Jonathan Fletcher's house. He then asks you if you want to go to the gym, and on and on. And I don't want to tell that story. It's not for me to tell. But for me, in my experience, I learned, I need to be incredibly vulnerable immediately with people that they represent my family, they represent this context. So I need to be incredibly vulnerable. I can talk about my sin. I can talk about my relationships. I can talk about my expectations or my dreams. I can talk about my ambition. I talk about my concerns about myself. And if you're still doubting this, if you've been in this environment, very often you'll have a ministry time at the end of a service, and there's an expectation. And my wife, then girlfriend, used to say to me at the end of a service, well, I don't have anything that I need prayer for. Why can't we just thank God? And I think that she wasn't brought up in a Christian home, and she saw it straight through. Why do I need to be talking about all this stuff with people I don't know immediately out the gate? There's this expectation that if you think of that as being the quick insight that she had, well, what about a cell group? What about a one-to-one relationship or a mentor or that discipleship relationship? A person with power in that situation is a narcissist, has an abusive tendency, desires to control. Oh, they've got someone ready-made. Not someone, they've got some people. They've got many people. And that's what we're seeing over and over. I don't think the church has prepared individuals, didn't prepare me, to personify the Jesus that I read in the Bible in the way that I was told I was learning. And that's one of the biggest failures, I think, of the evangelical church. The discipleship course didn't do it. The services that you attend don't do it. The service that you're expected to do for the audience of one and all the other sort of commercialized sort of language that's around this stuff doesn't teach you to do it. I think we've got it wrong massively. And, excuse me, a bit of a cough. And I think there's a real failure going on at the moment. And when I read on websites what churches are offering now, when I visit churches, there's this dislocation from real life until you enter church life, which isn't preparing you, it's merely grooming you. I'd love to hear what you think about this. I'm just sort of starting to think about it. I'd always thought about safeguarding. I'd always thought about the bad apple in the group, but I think the culture is an abusive grooming culture that not by default, but very often it's taken advantage of. I'd love to hear what you think. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing more of this, talking about this, and I'm going to start speaking with people who are happy to be on camera, rather than saying to them, yep, we're going to make a documentary. That's not what I think. It's too slow. And I don't think there's the audience to make a documentary either, but I think there is an audience to have these kind of podcast chats. So that's going to be next on the list. I'd love to hear if you want to get involved, and I'd love to hear if you think it's worth doing. This isn't an opportunity just to kind of air my laundry or air other people's laundry, but it is an opportunity to explore the faith that I want to be part of that isn't reflected in the church that I grew up in. Thanks, guys.